This is the cheapest BMW on the internet. And today, we're gonna my summer car this and see if we can save it from the scrapyard. I actually bought this E91 2 years ago and used it as my daily and tow car for the race cars. And when I say it's the cheapest BMW on the internet, I bought it off Marketplace for £500. Now, why was it so cheap? This car had 225,000 miles on the clock and sometimes didn't start. But a new starter motor and some other small fixes later, I had a working E91 for less than most people pay for a month's rent. Since then, I've driven over 50,000 miles, bringing this car to 275k on the clock, making it a true high mileage hero, but I have neglected it over those 2 years, hence why it's now in a pretty sorry state. Now let's see what's wrong with this car. The battery doesn't work. The handbrake doesn't work. The clutch doesn't work. The heating and the AC don't work. There's lights on the dash. The door doesn't work. That one does, this one doesn't. The button for the split gate doesn't work. The tyre's on cords. Do I need to explain this one? There's a water leak. There's a lot of carbon build-up on the intake because it's a diesel with an EGR. It's also overdue a full service and there's more issues underneath. Now, why are we trying to save this heap of scrap? I already have a new car. Well, I mean, it'd make more sense to put it on Marketplace and make it someone else's problem, or scrap it. That would make more sense. The reality is, I've spent too much on this car just to scrap it or sell it. And like every other car enthusiast, I grew attached to the shitbox I said I wouldn't get attached to. But despite all that, I'm not actually going to keep the car, and I'll explain why later. But first, it's mad scientist time because I have a whiteboard.
I have it too.
And I swear this list was shorter in my head. We need to start off with the engine, which for that we need to replace the fuel injectors and the seals for said injectors. The reason being, when you're driving the car around, when you put your foot down, there's a bit of black smoke, which indicates a problem with the injectors. And I've had a read of the error codes on the car, which indicates injector problems. We then need to take the intake manifold off, clean it out and remove all the carbon buildup, and before putting it back on, we've got some intake seals to fit. After that, it's just simple service items like oil, air, cabin filters, and of course the oil itself. And I almost forgot, water pump. Need to sort that coolant leak out. So we're gonna start by getting the car up in the air, but because I don't have a lift, we have a jack and some axle stands. What could possibly go wrong?
Didn't sound very good.
We start off by removing the cabin air filter and the scuttle panel to gain access to the top of the engine, followed by the engine cover and the intake ducting panel. Once the plastics are out of the way, the next step is to remove the front strut braces and remove the wiring for the injectors. Now we have access to the intake manifold, so we can unbolt that from the engine and disconnect the EGR. There's also a couple of sensors which need disconnecting to get the intake out of the way. Now we've exposed the top of the engine, I'm going to use some blue roll to block up the exposed intake ports and stop any debris or misplaced tools from dropping into the engine, because that would be a bad do and I don't particularly want to strip an engine if something drops in. Now it's time to get onto the injectors. Cylinder 4, 3 and 2 injectors come out without a problem, but cylinder 1 had a point to prove. And after an hour of prying, hammering and trying to use the wrong tools, I decided it was probably a better idea to wait for the right tools and continue taking other parts off the engine instead. So I took the cover off to remove the air filter and removed the turbo inlet pipe. Now we've got the air filter off, we can see just how overdue a service this car is. It's black, and I take the cover off The paper fins underneath, also black. That's overdue. I've also taken the intake pipe off that goes to the turbo, and there's a lot of oil in there. There's a lot of oil everywhere, if I'm honest, which could be a turbo leaking oil. We've also noticed there's more than one coolant leak. So there's residue around the coolant pump down here, but there's also residue up here around this pipe that goes into the EGR cooler. So there might be more issues with this car we haven't discovered yet, like this. In fact, there are that many leaks, I can't really see what I'm doing. There's oil buildup and dirt and everything everywhere. So it's time to get high on brake cleaner.
More than 90% of you aren't subscribed, and if you're enjoying this video so far, why not click that big red subscribe button? It's free, just like our content. We carry on stripping parts off the engine, starting with the EGR cooler, and it doesn't take long to find the cause of that second leak.
That would explain the leak. We've run into some problems. There's a second leak, which I hadn't seen before, and it gets worse because there's all that oil buildup on the intake. I've stuck my hand into the turbo and there's movement. When you've got excessive oil on your intake and you have a turbocharged car, there's a good chance you might have an issue with either the turbo or the PCV system. In this case, I've gone to check the turbo because there's a lot of oil pooling around the start of the turbo. And to see if the turbo's okay, you can move the compressor wheel side to side and forward and back. Side to side movement, a little bit of that, that's fine. Forward and back movement, that's not okay. I have forward and back movement. This is a problem.
Before I could think too hard about my life choices, I took off some more coolant lines and the main thermostat for better access.
As you can see, we're back at the whiteboard and my hands are filthy. We found more problems with the BM. We need a thermostat, we need a coolant pipe for the EGR cooler, and we need a turbo because there's a lot of play in that turbo and it is leaking oil. Maybe we should have scrapped this car.
And with daylight fading, it was time to come up with another plan.
So it's another day, we've got parts on order now, so we've got to wait for those before we can really continue. And the stuck injector, David Lawrence Racing has come in clutch. I've gone and picked up a diesel injector pulling kit and I've managed to create this monstrosity. So this time we are using the right tools, mostly. I've got the slide hammer for my wheel bearing kit, which is hooked up to an adapter, to another adapter, to the adapter which hooks up to the injector, which should hopefully work. I'm really hoping this actually pulls the injector out, because if it doesn't, we might have a bit of a problem. Let's give it a go.
One eternity later.
In the injector toolkit Dave provided, there was an air-powered hammer, but I didn't have an air compressor to use it, and after spending way too much time with the slide hammer, I jumped in my car and bought myself one. So we set the air compressor up and hooked up the air hammer and waited for something to happen. After some time, I found myself a pry bar and started prying at the injector. Then we waited some more.
That's problematic.
I then decided to turn up the pressure regulator on the compressor, and eventually the air hammer vibrated the top of the injector loose, which wasn't the plan, but out of curiosity, we took the top off.
If you ever wanted to find out what was inside an injector, there's a spring, part of the spring assembly, and a spinny thing that does spinny things.
Up until this point, I'm sure some of you have been shouting at the screen because I was using the slide hammer and the air hammer on the side of the injector, not the top. And that's because I couldn't get it off. But now it is, I went hunting for another adapter. Once I found the correct one, we moved the air hammer onto the top of the injector and wait some more. At this point, I'm getting desperate. I don't know what I was hoping to achieve here, but removing the injector wasn't it. After a few messages in different group chats, I got the idea to use my engine crane to pull the injector, and to quote the message exactly, hook an engine crane to it, apply upwards, tap side with a hammer, stand back. That last part was reassuring. Now I had to work out how to actually attach the engine crane, so using a wheel stud adapter, a wheel nut, and a tool from my axle pulling kit, again using the wrong tools in the best way possible, I had the engine crane hooked up to the injector. Theoretically, all I had to do now was apply upwards force, just enough to lift the front of the car off the axle stands and tentatively thwack it with a hammer, all whilst trying to stay far enough back from an angry flying injector. After a while, my housemate, who was filming at the time, got bored and left me to it, which is when I decided to reattach the air hammer from the side and stand even further back. Believe it or not, that didn't work. So I tried swapping the engine crane to the side and put the air hammer at the top of the injector. And when my housemate came out an hour later, she found me sat on the garage floor. I have tried everything there is to try. I've tried the slide hammer, tried pry bars, I've drowned in WD-40. I've also bought an air compressor. I've got and borrowed the air hammer from David Lawrence Racing. That hasn't pulled it out, so I've tried that from the side to try and vibrate it. I've then taken the top of the injector off and put the air hammer on top of that to try and vibrate it out, pull it up. That hasn't worked, so I've connected the engine crane to it as well. So there's both the engine crane and the air hammer. The engine crane has literally lifted the front of the car up, so the weight of the car is hanging off that one injector. So there's about a ton pulling that injector up, and it's still not coming out, even with the air hammer. Been speaking with 4-Paw Racing. They have said it might be that the injector has fused to the cylinder head, which is looking that way. And if it's fused to the cylinder head, there's only two things we can really do. Option one, we take the engine apart and replace the cylinder head, so engine rebuild. Option two, new engine, which would be cheaper than option one. So really the only option now we've got is stick a new engine in. F it, let's go get an engine.